Hello, everybody. We will give it another 30 seconds or so before we fully, before I get started with my first discussion. So I believe that we are still populating a little bit. But I did want to just let everybody know that we are going to have to delay this session probably 3 to 4 minutes or so. We are just waiting on our second presenter for the session. So if everybody could just kind of sit tight for a few minutes, we will get started in about 3 to 4 minutes, or when we get more information on this next presenter. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat box, and I will also put this in the chat box so that we all know. Thanks, guys, and I will be back in a few minutes to start everything up. Hi, Jai. I just wanted to let you know we are just waiting on one of the presenters right now.
Okay,
so
thank you.
We are in a slight holding pattern.
Yeah, holding. Okay, thanks for letting me know.
Thank you. Okay, can I get one of my interpreters to pop in? Whoever wants to get started first.
We're all good.
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to get started. We do know that Kimberly will be joining us, and she just had a state COVID issue that she had to address quickly. So she is on her way. And just to do a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. My name is Jenny Sitchell. I am with the National Council on Independent Living. And I am super excited to welcome everybody here today and welcome you back. If you came yesterday to the biennial ILDA Independent Living Institute, and welcome you to it if you're just coming today for the first time. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a white female with brown curly hair that is currently in a top knot on my head. And then I have a green tank top on, green shirt on. Um, Today's presentation is brought to you by the ILNet Training and Technical Assistance Project for CILs and CILs. The ILNet is operated by ILRU in collaboration with Nickel, April, and the University of Montana, with support provided by the Administration for Community Living at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So captions are available today. They're available in Zoom. You can click show subtitle in your Zoom menu bar to turn them on. They will also be running at AI Media. That URL is too long to read, but I will share it in the chat as soon as I complete the housekeeping tips. AI Media will also allow you to enlarge the font and change the color and contrast of the captioning. ASL presenters are here today and will be for all Institute sessions. ASL interpreters. We are presenting in gallery view, so the interpreters should always be visible, although if they're not, you will need to make sure that you are in side-by-side mode as we are PowerPoint sharing today. If you're not in that mode, you can go to the menu bar that says you are viewing Jenny Sitchel's screen, click View Options, and select Side-by-Side View. This will allow you to see the PowerPoint and interpreters at the same time. If you are using dual screens, you may want to click Optimize for dual screens. You can also adjust the size of the PowerPoint and the interpreters by using the slider feature in the middle of the screen. We do not recommend joining sessions by mobile or tablet if you want to see the interpreters and the PowerPoint at the same time. Although if you are joining by mobile or tablet, you can swipe left on most of those to change your view. You do not need to be on Zoom video to access the Institute sessions. We will read all slide content and all questions out loud so that the content will be available to individuals calling on the phone. We do have public chat turned off, but you will still be able to send chat messages to the hosts and panelists. And this is for accommodation reasons and also to keep it a little bit quieter and allow the hosts and panelists to fully explain what they are speaking about. We do ask that you reserve the chat for technical support questions and only submit content questions if and when the presenters ask for it in the chat. There are a number of easy and accessible ways to submit content questions to the presenters, though, outside of the chat. If you're on Zoom, you can simply type your question into the Zoom Q&A tab. You're also welcome to email your question to me, your session host, and my email is Jenny, Jenny, @ncil.org. Finally, if you're on the telephone today, you may press *9 to indicate that you have a question. Nearing the end of each session, we will show you a link for an evaluation, and it will be put in the chat box as well. We really ask that you fill out the evaluation because it allows us to really create content that people want to see and make sure that we have presentations that are valuable. And I want to make sure that everybody filled out their evaluations from yesterday. If you didn't and you still need the link, shoot me an email. And then I also want to check in before we get started quickly and make sure that if you were at the session yesterday morning, you've done your homework and watched the Ed Roberts video. If you haven't, let me know too, and we will put that link in the chat. So I hope that these tips have been helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know via the chat, email, or the Q&A box. So now it's time to get our first presentation today started. And this is going to be on developing leaders through diverse and inclusive consumer-directed youth leadership opportunities. I want to introduce our presenters for this morning. We have Baier and Kimberly Tissot this morning, and then this afternoon we'll have Aaron Kimberly along with a panel of Wednesday, Alexis, and Jack. So I'm going to hand it over to Aaron to get started with what you will learn during these sessions. Aaron, you want to take it away?
Hi, everybody. All right. And let's see. And Jenny, as far as slides, should I just let you know?
Yep, just let me know when you want me to progress them forward, and you
Okay.
can just say next slide, please.
Okay. So let's go to the Aaron's Journey slide. But
We're good.
hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Baier. I am a white male with red hair, lots of freckles. And currently I'm wearing a white shirt, brown eyes, and I am about 38 years old. So I want to just, Kimberly and I really wanted to start this conversation on youth leadership development in centers for independent living, with a little bit of our own stories. So I'm gonna take some time here and just share a little bit about myself and my own path to leadership in independent living. So
Aaron, do you mind just holding on for 1 second?
yeah,
Okay, I think we should be good. I believe the ASL interpreter's screen had frozen, and so we now have the other ASL interpreter spotlighted. And
Okay,
Kimberly
cool.
just got on the call.
If
Yep.
So just giving you a heads up too.
Perfect. Excuse me for 1 second. All right. Welcome, Kimberly, and welcome everybody else. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. So yes, my journey. So I've had vision issues ever since I was, a young child. However, that did not really become formalized as a disability until I was 16 years old. Up until then, my eyesight seemed to be stable. It seemed that I would be able to function, quote unquote, normally. And so, I was beginning to learn how to drive, those sorts of things that a teenager would do. And then when I was 16, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. And hold on a second. I'm going to turn my voiceover off because I keep getting chat things. Jenny, if questions come in during the chat, feel free to interrupt me. I'm just going to make it so that I can't hear them.
Will do, definitely.
Thank you so much. All right. So, age 16, diagnosed, legally blind. And here I was, thinking I had all of these dreams and passions that you would when you're 16, going to be driving cross country and doing all these great things. And then, overnight, going from that kind of freedom to feeling completely isolated, completely separated from my peers, and really not having any clue as to what I wanted to do the rest of my life. Fortunately, I was connected with vocational rehabilitation and a variety of peer counseling services at that young age. And it really sort of began my journey towards leadership. The counselors and peers that I worked with, not only were they just counselors trying to help me navigate and adapt to this change in who I was, but they were also, as I said, peers. They were people who were also blind, or with other types of disabilities that really inspired me to say, all right, this is not the end of my road. This is not the end of my journey. And from there, I decided I was going to take the path towards clinical psychology. This was a path where I felt I could share the help that I had received with other people. And that was my goal. You know, a lot of people say they want to help people, but what that looks like is very different for everyone. In my eyes, it was psychology. It was helping one person at a time to overcome their barriers, their challenges. When I was 17, I started working part-time for a sheltered workshop, and the majority of the people there were also people who are blind. And the mentality there was, this is where you're going to be the rest of your life. If anybody on the call has ever worked for a sheltered workshop, where they hire mostly people with disabilities, I think the vibe can be very similar for anywhere. This is where you're going to be. This is what you're good for. But at the same time, I was also being pushed to go to college. So right after high school, I jumped right into a 2-year degree with an emphasis in psychology. That dream, that passion was still there to help people. So I pushed through, but I continued to work part-time at the sheltered workshop. First couple of years in college, my grades and my advancement there was not good. I was not a good student. I was not focused, despite the level of love I had for what I was learning. I was struggling. I hadn't found the groove, and from that, I ended up finding sort of a split in my supports. Especially my parents. It was pretty clear, like my mother was pushing me, continue with college, don't give up. Just because you're blind doesn't mean you can't do what I never did. The other side, my father, for a time, it's okay that you're not succeeding. You can always fall back on this sheltered employment. You can always fall back on this job that is always going to be there for you because of who you are. And to me, it felt like that was an easy way out. And whether it was an intentional thing on his part, my father really set that rebellious spirit on fire in me. And I said, you know what? No, I'm not going to just take that easy path. So I continued with college. I buckled down. I finished my 2-year degree, went on to a different 4-year college in Cortland, New York, where I finished my bachelor's of arts with an emphasis in psychology. And at the time, my plan was, continue with clinical psychology and move into that counseling world. But life has a funny way of telling you what to do or telling you what you should do, and pushing us in directions. And for me, when I moved to that new college, I acquired a guide dog. It opened up a lot of freedoms for me, and I learned a lot more how to be my own independent person through having a different tool at my side. And I found new mentors. I had professors who didn't let the vision issue become a barrier. They helped me find ways around it, helped me to adapt. And it was during that time that I learned about independent living. A person who would later become a mentor to me, Fran Pizzola, she was the former executive director of Access to Independence in Cortland, would come to my class and talk to us about independent living and people with disabilities. I didn't know it at the time, but about a year after that, I applied for a peer counseling job during my final semester at college. And I had no idea what I was getting into, but I just knew I was a peer, I had a disability, and I wanted to help people, and counseling was what I wanted to do. So I applied. And, a few weeks later, I was working part-time for Access to Independence, doing peer mentoring and counseling for young people and adults on employment and getting through college. And I was just like, oh my God, this is exactly what I wanted to do. So I finished up my bachelor's. I quickly went from part-time to full-time at that job, doing peer mentoring. And over the next 15 years at that center would really shape the direction I would go in. Again, I felt strongly about helping one person at a time and being that one-on-one mentor to people, passing along what I had gained from all of the mentors and people that had helped me. And that drive really pushed me to continue to learn about independent living, about different people with different disabilities, about the different systems that influence our lives. And so early on in my career, I started a youth group back at the Sheltered Workshop. So I had started back then wanting to do youth work. And that ballooned into, meeting new mentors and doing social activities. But then in my early career with Access to Independence, I found an organization called the National Youth Leadership Network, which I will talk more about later. And then soon after that, found another organization called Youth Power. And these organizations were what I the early youth movement. But I know, as all of you learned yesterday, independent living was really started by young people with disabilities. So this was really a continuation of that youth voice, empowering people with disabilities to take control of their own lives and to find those leadership skills that are going to help them in their own life, and also to shape what the disability rights and independent living movement would become later on. So between those two organizations and the various opportunities that I worked towards at Access to Independence, those 15 years led me from peer mentoring to a fully fledged youth transition program with IEP and 504 advocacy and college preparation and career planning, which then led me to housing and transportation and voting rights advocacy. That really led me into general systems advocacy and working with Youth Power and the National Youth Leadership Network on bigger issues that were affecting the lives of thousands, if not millions of people with disabilities across our country. And I started to realize that I can continue to work one-on-one and help one person at a time. But then there's this whole other side where I could, along with other advocates, become a part of bigger solutions that really helped a lot of people. And that really solidified my passion for advocacy and leadership. From there, I really got it in my head that I was going to be a leader in this movement, and I wanted to be a leader in this movement and help others become leaders in this movement. That's, to me, what youth transition really became, was leadership in myself, leadership in whatever career path a person wants to take, but then also understanding that independent living needed leaders as well, and that opportunities continued to be not only thrown at myself, but at others around me. And sometimes I just needed to say yes and give it a try and challenge myself. So when the opportunity came for me to pursue a master's degree in public administration, which is, nonprofit management and government affairs, things of that nature, which I never thought I would have even considered this. But after speaking with some people, who also had that degree or knew more about it, it was a catalyst that drove me towards a bigger leadership role. I took on bigger and more difficult programs at Access to Independence, running, Medicaid waiver services and architectural barrier removal programs through different Medicaid funded programs, which I probably never would have been able to do had I not decided that maybe learning some of those policy issues, the systems advocacy work that I had done, understanding, legal documents, and just challenging myself to, go beyond just that one-on-one peer mentoring mentality. But what was great is I never lost that foundation. I was brought up through that foundation, and the youth movement sticks with me, and that spirit sticks with me. And then soon after I acquired my master's degree in 2017, I became the executive director of Access to Independence after the former leader had retired. And when I did that, it kind of culminated all of those feelings of what can I do from the top down to help more people? And also it went from continuing the idea of helping one person at a time, but instead of helping a consumer or a person with a disability who was struggling in the world, I was helping employees of my center to become stronger leaders, become better employees, become, do better at what they're trying to accomplish, find their goals and their passions. And to me, that's what drives a ladder in a nonprofit world. It's not profits, it's not the pursuit of money, it's the passion for what we're trying to accomplish. And so soon after that, I needed a change in my life. Unfortunately, leadership does burn us out at times, and we need to recognize those things in ourselves. And so I decided it was time to a change of scenery, and an opportunity came up to work for the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley as the director of administration. And so I applied, and somebody asked me, why would you take a step down? You were an executive director. Why would you step down to something below that? And we have to remember that leadership comes in a lot of shapes, and a title does not define what you are, what you know, or what you're capable of. And leadership to me was more about learning than it was about teaching. I learned just as much from the employees that I worked with as they may have learned from me. And what was incredible was this opportunity took me to a new location. It got me out of a rut, and it gave me the opportunity to learn from an entire new man alive. And so it was always that balancing act, you know, learning and then passing along what I had learned, getting new resources and passing those resources on to people for them to use. It was about connecting and bridging those gaps, not about me lifting someone up. Rather, it was about giving them the tools and the support and the guidance to help them lift themselves up. And that to me was really that youth movement, that foundational youth drive, still driving everything I do. And so now here I am, 16 years into the independent living world, still loving every day, still loving everything I do. And looking around and seeing new youth movements spring up and new ways to develop that leadership that I want, but also seeing so much potential leadership in my colleagues and those people who I work with. So I've spoken a lot. I'm gonna take a breath, get a drink of water, and I'm gonna pass it over to Kimberly Tissot to share her journey.
Hey everyone, I'm Kimberly Tissot, and I first want to apologize for being late. I was stuck on the phone with our health department who wanted to start doing data collection on disability. So I had to definitely finish up with that situation. We've been advocating for that for quite some time. So I apologize for my lateness. I am Kimberly Tissot, and my pronouns are she and her. And I am a white female in my 40s with light blonde, short hair, and I'm wearing tortoise shell glasses, and I'm wearing a floral shirt today. I am going to start off a little bit about my journey of how growing up with a disability, but how I also got connected with independent living, and then also talking about why I stay in independent living and all of the amazing opportunities that we all have. So I currently serve as the president and CEO of ASL South Carolina, and I've been here for about 12 years. Well, just had my 12th year anniversary back in May. And I'm also the board president of the Association for Programs for Rural Independent Living, otherwise known as APRIL. And I'll tell you a little bit about ASL South Carolina. We are the first Center for Independent Living in South Carolina, and we actually serve half the state. So we have over 23 designated Part C counties, but we also do a lot of statewide advocacy and systems change to better promote disability justice. And so we're always working on different levels, state, local, national, and some even international levels, just trying to make the world a little bit better for folks with disabilities. I have been disabled since the age of 2. I had a childhood cancer and was not expected to make it when I was 2 years old, and had my leg amputated. And I had something called a hemipivectomy, which in the picture you will see I am standing. I utilize crutches as my style of mobility because that is what's preferred. And I also have a full level amputation, which goes up all the way until half of the pelvic bone. And in that particular picture, I'm standing outside in front of greenery and have a black blazer on and black pants and wearing flats. So I've been disabled since the age of 2, so really don't know what it's like, but I do what it's like to not have a disability. But I will tell you, I do know I learned very early on how I was treated differently, and how the search for other peers like me was such a need in my life. Having one leg, I never knew anybody with one leg, let alone a successful person with a disability when I was younger, and the impact that would have probably made would have been pretty significant. at that age. All I remember is seeing people who had one leg and walking on crutches who were homeless. And so I did not have a CIL in my life. I did not have other opportunities to learn from people with disabilities. And so that was obviously a need from very early on. I have had past work experience working with children with disabilities and with healthcare conditions like cancer in the medical setting. So I was something that was called a child life specialist. For several years, I worked with kids who were in the burn hospital to cope with their procedures and to help them be independent. So really kind of more of the in the medical setting, but pretty much promoting what I knew was significantly important, which helping somebody overcome the medical procedures that they may have to go through, and also the impact of their medical procedures, whether it be disability, burns, any of that. So was able to truly learn from the individuals that I was working with. At that time. I also was a disability rights advocate within our P&A system in South Carolina. I had probably one of the worst jobs there. I had to go into nursing homes and ensure that people's rights were being respected. And so saw a lot of abuse and neglect within that field. And so I started in the independent living movement when I was 28 years old. So I guess I was still a youth. And really started as the assistant director of our organization and later became the executive director of our organization. And when I came in to assess the programs, the programs were just really outdated for the center, did not really include the disability-led philosophy that we so need within our community. That I ensured that any program moving forward was not only going to meet the core services, but was also going to meet the needs of the actual people that we serve, not what we think they need or not what worked 20 years ago, but really the current needs of the folks that we're serving. And so really looked at the community and just saw a significant gap within the younger population who we were serving. And the same population that I experienced kind of being, floundering for such a long time, not knowing who I could connect with or getting the peer support. So our organization ultimately started a youth program. The first youth program that we started was the EQUIP program, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. And then we did a transition conference to assist youth with disabilities with becoming as independent as possible and definitely transitioning from the school setting into adult life, but also we did youth leadership forum as well. So I'll talk a little bit about those programs, but wanting to go back to how I ended up kind of building the programs from not only the needs of people with disabilities, but also driven and compared by the passion of the need from my own experience. And so as a child with one leg growing up, there was obviously not a lot of opportunities. This was pre-ADA. And then when I turned, I guess I was 10 years old when the ADA passed. And so I got to experience a little bit of both. And to this day, I see some changes, but a lot of changes that we have to continue pushing forward. But I was left out of, PE. I was actually exempt from physical education in school, was told no a lot of times, or no, you can't do that. You can't do that because that's not going to be safe for you, or you can't do that because you have one leg, you don't have two legs. And so that was obviously always being brought to my attention. I get it. I know I have one leg, but what can I do to participate in the activities that I wanted to participate in? And so at a very early on in my life, I did have to advocate, and similar to Aaron's parents, I had parents that wanted a good life for me, but just didn't know how, because of that protector factor, but also did not have very high expectations. So they did not think that I could, that I would go to college, that I would drive, that I would, not do a lot of that. So I really had to take ownership of the way that my life was going to be driven. And so um, I did end up playing soccer after being told that I couldn't play soccer. And I had to really, truly explain how we can accommodate me back in the day on how to play soccer. And so I made my own rules up and presented them to this committee to approve me to play soccer, which was ridiculous. But I had to say, I have an advantage because I've got 2 crutches and a leg. So what I'll do is not kick the ball with one of the crutches. I'll kick it with one crutch and my foot. And so that was one of the things that I ended up presenting. But it was very simple. It wasn't huge, and it's something definitely did not need to exclude me from participating. But I say all of this too, and sharing my past experience, because I think youth have relied on the parental involvement and parental movement for so long, and that does not work. I am a parent of a child with an intellectual disability as well, and he very much is a disability advocate, disability rights advocate, because the way that I even parent, I catch myself sometimes, but I let him lead because he can tell me more about his disability than I can. And that's very important. So I'm telling you all this too, as we are going to have some hard conversations today, because serving youth needs to be disability driven. It needs to be led by Centers for Independent Living, and it needs to have that disability led component, because that is what youth are truly missing in their lives. They're missing the ability to relate, but also the ability to learn from other people with disabilities about their rights, about the opportunities that are in front of them, but also how to advocate for themselves and also others around them. So using the experience of my past was really important to build some of our programs, because I always would go back when we were in the very beginning stages of building the youth programs. I would always go back and say, okay, remember that feeling, Kimberly, remember that feeling that I felt by being seen as different in high school or being seen different in middle school or elementary school. And are we hitting that? And then reaching out to other youth. And that's when we very much learned that this is not our movement. This is the youth with disabilities must drive this force to make sure we are reaching their needs. And so we will talk a lot more about that. I also think that being a disability-led organization like Centers for Independent Living are so impactful, just like what was said yesterday, and Aaron brought up just a second ago about our movement started with youth with disabilities. Our movement started with people with disabilities. We were the lead of our movement, and we have to continue that. So Centers for Independent Living leading and passing, legislation and making change in our communities about us is significant. We should be leading the charge, because when we don't lead the charge, that is when legislation occurs that does not support us, that we have not approved, or policies and programs being released without us not being involved. And so that's one of the areas that I definitely preach about, which is using and being powerful. And with that, we have been able, in little old South Carolina, red, extremely conservative state, we have been able to really pass groundbreaking legislation that has been a model throughout the country. And one of those were the Person with Disabilities Right to Parent Act. And so that really allowed disabled parents to have rights and protections within our state, that mandates that family court that mandates that Department of Social Services is not removing a child because of a parent's disability, which was actually occurring. And so nobody was looking at this issue. Nobody was looking at it because they weren't seeing, they weren't hearing from people with disabilities who were being impacted. And so we were able to pass the Persons with Disabilities Right to Parent Act, and that was our effort. That was our CILs effort because we raised awareness and did something about it. We also recently passed a law to end subminimum wage in our state. So we became the 13th state to end subminimum wage, and it was a bipartisan effort. Both efforts were bipartisan, but with the majority of conservatives making sure that it was passing. So and that's something that you're going to see a theme throughout my messaging today about the importance of consumer-led services and consumer-led initiatives, and how it's critical for our organizations to truly be disability-led, including our youth programs, being youth with disability-led. And you'll meet a lot of folks on the panel this afternoon too that are part of our programs. And then, what keeps me an IL? It's definitely not a glamorous job to be a director of a CIL. I feel like we're always writing grants. We're always having to be approached with ableism. And so it's a repeat. It's definitely a fight to make sure that our organization is protected, but most importantly, the consumers that we serve are having the opportunities and are not being treated differently, like how obviously Aaron and I have been treated within growing up with a disability. But what keeps me here is the opportunities ahead of us, how impactful our movement is. We are really the only cross-disability led groups that are making a difference, calling out ableism, serving people. Like, we've got so many different responsibilities, but I stay in IL because it's definitely my passion. I was missing that my entire life until I came over to our organization at the age of 28 to serve as the assistant director. And I had never heard of a Center for Independent Living previously in my 28 years before. So it's really critical to make sure that we are really practicing what we're preaching. There are parent movements. That's not us. Sometimes we have to work against the parent movements. There are other groups that serve people with disabilities, but oftentimes they don't even hire people with disabilities. And so we are truly critical, and that is what drives me to continue pushing and being involved with independent living. So we can go to the next slide. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of our programs today and just show some examples. This is definitely a nothing about us without us approach. This goes through all levels within Centers for Independent Living. So we are consumer controlled, and that is at every bit of our within all of our programs and services. So consumer control, no programs should even be created without the consumers who we're serving. And so that's critical within all components, but absolutely critical for youth. And so there is, to have a successful youth program, you have to be consumer led. And can't do what you think is best for youth. You have to do what you know is best for youth because you're letting youth lead this movement. So we're going to talk about some programs. So youth run and youth led programs from the past, present, and future that we learned from. So one will be the National Youth Leadership Network. And so Aaron's going to talk all about that. And the Pat Figueroa, I think I hopefully said that, a youth sponsorship, the Youth Leadership Advocacy Network, The Association for Programs for Rural Independent Living, there is a significant initiative for youth within that, and they do have a conference coming up. Equip, Young Adult Leadership Group, which you'll learn more about, which was our first youth program before the transition core service. South Carolina Youth Leadership Forum, and then our pre-employment transition services. So our organization has a $1 million contract with South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation to conduct pre-employment transitions within South Carolina schools. And this is more of a CIL-led initiative because of all the advocacy and awareness that we've done to ensure that CILs are being involved in youth services. And I'm going to pass it to Aaron to share an example of his programs.
Thank you, Kimberly. All right, so youth run, youth led. I mentioned earlier, there were a couple of early youth movement programs that I worked with, and they were truly with boots on the ground, grassroots. However, not necessarily focused on independent. The first one that I ever got involved with was the National Youth Leadership Network. This is a name many people now may not even know. National Youth Leadership does not exist in the way it was. The director of that network, Betsy Valness, from way back in the day, pulled together a governing board of all youth. Am I still breaking up? I will keep going. I apologize if I start breaking up. We've been having internet issues, so just let me know if I need to slow down. So the National Youth Leadership Network, they had a governing board of all young people with disabilities under the age of, I believe it was 27 or 28 at the time. No one older than that. And I got involved by applying to be a part of that governing board. And it was through this organization where I met a lot of young leaders, many of whom you'll probably see their names still around in the independent living movement now. And I think, the coolest thing about NYLN, what they did was, one, they connected youth with one another. They connected national youth leadership forums, and they connected different smaller youth movements across this country and gave them sort of a platform on a bigger stage. And they also provided technical assistance, helping make materials more accessible for young people, maybe younger people with different reading and literacy abilities, and making sure that information about independent living, about services for people with disabilities were accessible for young people. We advised and were resource consultants for other youth movements and other initiatives. I remember an opportunity to talk with people at a group called Mobility International USA, and learn about, international travel and study and work abroad opportunities for people with disabilities, and how they were connecting people. And again, I go back to that idea of connecting things. Quick shout out, some of the young people that I met: Eleanor Cantor, who currently works with Nickel, Kara Leibowitz, who just recently left Nickel and is now working for an independent living center here in New York, the late Stacy Milburn, rest in power, I met and got to know these leaders through the National Youth Leadership Network. And I would say that it was one of the founding things that kept me interested in independent living, kept me interested in disability rights, and kept me motivated to help young people find a path forward to where they see themselves becoming successful. It was also one more of those programs where I encouraged other young people to get involved. The idea that you can be involved as a volunteer and running an organization as a board member, not just as an employee, but running an organization that is truly impactful for people. It's a great feeling, but that is where you start to learn about the diversity and the power that other people have and that you can sort of feed into. And this was really the start of it for me. Next slide. The Pat Figueroa Junior Youth Sponsorship. It's a New York State initiative. For those of you who don't know the name Pat Figueroa, I actually am fortunate enough now to work for Denise Figueroa, who is Denise Figueroa, the executive director of the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley. Pat, or Patricio Figueroa, is her late husband. He started the first independent living center here in New York State back in 1978, and was a young person with a disability at the time. And in his passing, our New York State Independent Living Council has started this Pat Figueroa Youth Sponsorship, which offers scholarships and financial assistance to young people with disabilities who are interested in developing their leadership. If they want to attend a conference, attend a seminar, any sort of thing where cost is prohibiting them from participating, this sponsorship is there. We have a goal to get this scholarship out to at least 5 young people each year, but have definitely funded well over that in the past. And what's great, and I think a critical piece of this scholarship is, while it's a part of our State Independent Living Council, which is not necessarily youth run or youth driven, the decisions and administration of this scholarship is really left to a youth committee, which is comprised of young people with disabilities. And so that youth-led, youth-run mentality continues through that committee into this Pat Figueroa sponsorship, which inspires and empowers young people with disabilities to pursue leadership in New York State. And I hope that there are similar things, elsewhere in our country. Next slide, please. So I also spoke about youth power early on as sort of a founding. It was like NYLN, or the National Youth Leadership Network, but it was New York State focused. And youth power at the time was youth led and youth driven. And times change, and sometimes when a program can no longer truly be youth led, then it's time to change. The Youth Leadership Advocacy Network, which is now part of the Western New York Independent Living Center in Buffalo, New York, is sort of a continuation of this youth movement here in New York State. And while it's focused in the Buffalo Center, it is truly a statewide initiative to keep young people with disabilities empowered in independent living, and is staffed and governed really by young people with disabilities in our state. And this is, really still fairly new compared to some of the other programs I've mentioned. Only within the last couple of years has this one come to light. And so it's got some growing to do, but it's got a really good foundation of supporters, including myself and colleague Stephanie Orlando, who was the founder of Youth Power back in the early 2000s. And so while Stephanie and I are no longer young people, we still have that foundation built in and understand the importance of things being youth run and youth led. And so now the Youth Leadership Advocacy Network is picking up where others have left off and will be that empowering factor for young people going into the future. So these were and are the programs that have helped to shape, where I've come from, but also hundreds of young people across our country and across our state. And as I said, you'll find those people who were involved early on still working in independent living, because for me, and I believe for many others, it's that idea that a young person can gain and hold the respect of others, can truly be a contributing factor and an impactful person, an impactful facet of an entire movement. That this youth movement and independent living in these networks have truly been some of the most inclusive places that I've ever been a part of. Growing up in a small town, there was not a lot of diversity. And it was through NYLN, Youth Power, and these other groups that I experienced a much more diverse group of young people coming from mental health, coming from residential treatment facilities, juvenile justice. And what really unified many of these young people, myself included, was this idea of independent living and the philosophy it offers. So with that, I'm going to pass it off back to Kimberly to talk about some of the programs that she's got going on.
Thanks, Aaron. So the first program I want to talk about, which is a really great going after Aaron. So NYLN actually helped fund our first program by a $10,000 grant through the DD Council. And after we started the EQUIP program, our DD Council ended up funding it pretty much permanently to be able to serve youth and keep this program going, which is really, really fantastic. So we went from a $10,000 program to about a $74,000 program, but we also have additional grants supporting it. So about over $100,000 supporting this particular program, which is really neat. So thanks, NYLN. So our EQUIP leadership program, and you're going to hear from some of the graduates today and some of the leaders are on today as well. But the EQUIP leadership program is an EQUIP program that is peer-to-peer, and it focuses on empowerment support, building really young activists from the age of 13 to 28 with disabilities. Our youth leaders guide all of really our youth services, but they also are cross disability, and the work that we do within EQUIP has really allowed youth to really have their aha moment where they're getting that sense of disability pride, where they're starting to take charge of their lives, where they're activists and are up at the State House giving speeches on disability justice. And so the impact of this EQUIP youth program has been significant. And when we started this program too, I looked at this program as kind of a separate entity for a little while too, where it is led by youth with disabilities for youth with disabilities. So kind of the same CIL philosophy, but making sure that youth are steering every asset, every part of the program, and they are driving the program. So it is seen as still kind of a little bit of a separate entity within our entity, because we don't make any decisions on behalf of EQUIP. It's the young adults who are doing that. So we'll go to the next slide. And so in the photos too, you'll see there are youth with disabilities that are in a collage. And there's just different youth with a variety of different disabilities, different backgrounds, different races, that are engaged in the activity. And so the EQUIP Leadership Program consists of a few things. So it is led by youth with disabilities for youth with disabilities. And so they do have EQUIP Hangouts that they talk about different topics that will drive them, but the topics are picked from the youth, and then they will steer that conversation. Social skills group, that there's some youth that really wanted to create something that will help build social skills and really develop more friendships. And so there are different groups within that. There are Able South Carolina Youth Discord. Social media is not all cool for youth. So Facebook is not a way to attract youth. Instagram is really not either. It's really Discord. And I think TikTok is even kind of going out a little bit too. So really, I would not have known that. I just learned what Discord was. But this is the importance of youth leading their programs for them, is having them be in charge of what social media they're connected with and communicating with each other. And then we also do the EQUIP Summer Series, which is a sometimes it's a week. I think we've moved it to a week-long program that builds leadership skills and really builds the skills that IL was founded by. So disability pride, disability history, disability rights, disability justice, and looking at other marginalizations, including disability, but looking at how other multi-marginalized folks are being impacted. So there's a lot of work that is going on, and we'll go to the next slide. But they are actually leading this particular program. We have learned that it's very important that we don't take advantage of people's time. And our youth leaders are paid. They are trained employees within our program, and they are paid employees that work a couple hours a week, depending on their schedule, to help with the programming, to help with the topics that will be discussed, to help with social media, to help with empowering other youth with disabilities, coordinating the hangouts, and really making sure that we are staying consistent with the times of the organization. And we learn a lot from the youth about our overall approach to services and outreach as well. So they teach us, who a lot of us within our organization has been in the movement for some time, but they teach us because they have more knowledge about what relates to their generation. And so it's really important to be all ears within our youth. So youth lead for youth. And so making sure that, all components of youth services are looked at, and we test things within our youth too, to make sure that what we're doing may work, or some kind of event that we're planning would be attractive to other youth with disabilities. They have ownership of the program. And so no decisions are made without the youth. involved. We also build in work skills. And so not only are they becoming disabled activists, but they're also learning employment skills because they still have to do a timesheet if they're working, and still have to learn how to interact and send emails. And so they're learning invaluable skills that they're not being taught within the school system. They're developing their leadership skills because like I always remind folks, I'm not going to be around forever. And so it's really important to build the next generation of youth leaders to carry our movement later. And so looking, a lot of the youth leaders have gone on to either working for our CIL and having full-time positions, or working in some field where they're having an impact. A great success of one of our equipped leaders was that when they were done with the program, they actually went to go work and work with mobility management within our public transit authority, which helped with making sure that the bus system was accessible, which was really neat. We've got youth that have gone on to go get their degrees, which was something that they never thought that they could do without being involved within this program. As other peers with disabilities, they saw them going to college and doing it. And so it's been a really great program to see, but the leaders that have been developed, and you'll hear all from Wednesday today. Wednesday was one of the equipped leaders at one time, and you'll see how she's full-time on our staff now, and how she probably will be leading IL. She's already a leader, but she'll be leading it and taking it on most likely later. So, and then so there's a lot of just amazing outcomes from youth, and this. And they tell us often that they would have never had this opportunity, and they would have not, been able to move on without the experience from the EQUIP program. And it also allowed them to build confidence, because having a disability growing up and being told no or being seen as differently takes a toll on your overall confidence as well, and especially when you're young, when there's so many different opinions within the school system and within your different peer groups. So the confidence building is really critical within all components of our youth programs. The images that you see on the slide are our current paid youth leaders who serve other youth. You'll see there is Carrie, which is the first picture. She's Carrie McWhirter, and she has cerebral palsy and just recently graduated with her master's of social work from the University of South Carolina. And so she does all of the website, not the website, the social media for the EQUIP program. And then we have the second individual who is wearing a red shirt. He is a youth, an EQUIP leader who is currently getting a degree in communications, and he is an individual who has autism, and he's studying communication and feminism, which I just love. He is attending Clemson University. And then we have Grace in the next picture, and she's wearing a light blue shirt, and she is at the State House using a microphone and speaking towards the audience during Advocacy Day for Access and Independence. Grace has cerebral palsy and also autism, and also is on the board of Nickel. And she is in pre-med and is living on her own. She uses a communication device as well sometimes. And then we have the individual who has the red hair. She is attending college at Winthrop University. She has autism and some healthcare conditions. And her name is Alex, and they've made a significant impact in their family and throughout the state. Her father actually was an individual with a disability as well. And then the next picture is a young man with dark hair, and he is a person who has a little bit more hours. So he's really helping with coordinating the overall program. And he is a person with autism. So really relating with I think a population that is often overlooked within IL are people with IDD. So that is another one of our other leaders. And then we will go to the next slide. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to take control of the screen really quick because I'm going to show you this video of our youth leadership program, because I think it does a really good job with summing up and telling the Youth Leadership Forum's story. So let me share my screen. And hey, Jenny, I can't share.
Is it working?
I can't share it.
Okay, hold on. Let me try this out. There we go.
The Youth Leadership Forum, better known as YLF, is an event that is 4 days and 3 nights on a college campus for young adults with disabilities to get independent living skills and employment skills that will lead them to leadership positions. It started in 1992 in California. Our South Carolina YLF is part of the associations of YLF's Youth Leadership Forums for the nation. And then the DD Council funds ABLE to put on our state's YLF. So it's kind of a partnership of the two. The biggest goal with YLF and having delegates there for that amount of time in that immersive environment is to create that disability pride, foster that feeling, and then take it with you as you head back into your community.
Hi, I'm Troy Hall.
So a lot of the activities that we do are interactive. We do work readiness, so soft skills, so a lot of interacting with each other, practicing those soft skills. And then financial literacy is a big one. They're getting that hands-on practice and fun, and then they can take it and do it within their own lives. So it's kind of that overarching goal of living independently.
The classes are very interactive.
And they don't focus on one specific way of teaching them. They might have visuals, they might have some things that you can hear, or they might have things for you to get up and do.
So, what kind of things can you control in your life?
So today we played a little game on how to deal with different situations and how to emotionally, like with your feelings, how can you deal with that?
I would say that's out of our control.
It wasn't just them explaining things to us, but it was all of us coming together to talk about our own experiences and how we cope and how we solve them and how we do things individually and together as a community.
Who would you talk to if you need to change your schedule?
The staff, they're just really fun to be around.
You're gonna come with me!
Oh no!
Yay!
Like they make everything pretty much interactive, and also like they're really welcoming.
They are very competent people. Like I couldn't really imagine them doing a better job at basically leading a bunch of very different kinds of people. They're very accommodating of pretty much anybody and all of their needs, not just about disability and things. For example, I'm a vegan and they accommodated vegan food for me.
Just being somewhere where they cared about what helped me, accessibility, accommodations, even though they're things that are difficult to make inclusive or accessible for everybody, they think of it ahead of time and try to make it that way for everyone to be a part.
Hold your hand, reaching your fingertips to your friends by the side.
I think some of those interactive moving pieces, the dance, the theater is a point of being able to express yourself, and I think because they're in a comfortable environment with young adults just like them, they kind of let their guard down and can really explore.
I like to dance.
the dance program with Carolina Dance Collaborative and the theater session that was with Applied Theater Center. We placed those activities in the middle of the day to kind of break up some of those longer sessions with the intention of just getting a little bit of a brain break, but also exposing them to some of the activities that they can take and be involved in their own community. After a full day of a lot of taking in a lot of information, exploring new concepts, we've built in time for some social activities, some ways to decompress. And I think it's important for those delegates to kind of get a chance to relax a little bit, and they get to connect with their peers, especially peers that are in different parts of the state.
I like the community aspect of it as well as like the learning aspect of it. It's basically like going away to college for like the very first time, you know, getting to meet other people and stuff like that. Lots of different people that gone through basically similar experiences that you've gone through, and it kind of empowers you to know that, you know, you're not alone and there is a community for you.
You don't really realize that there's other people out there like you, especially depending on how you grew up. So it's kind of like a relieving feeling to know, like, hey, there is somebody out here that I can relate to, you know?
I meet new friends.
And that's a really amazing thing to see, that you go somewhere and it feels like family.
We have independence and inclusion, and that leads to endless possibilities for all people with disabilities.
YLF was one of the first environments I was in that taught me that disability wasn't something to be ashamed of, and it was in fact a wonderful community to take part of and to take pride in.
It's like more of like, yeah, you have a disability, but that's what separates you from everyone else. That's what makes you a unique person. And, you know, and also it's also nice to know that your voice isn't being silenced, it's being heard.
After YLF, I started doing more events with ABLE South Carolina, and eventually I became an equip leader. I've held events and talks about disability and disability pride and disability rights, and I'm able to help other people take pride in themselves and be able to advocate for themselves at school, just in my life, everywhere.
I actually was the president of student government for my school. YLF really helped me kind of express my thoughts and kind of articulate them better than what I was doing before.
After YLF, I was more, you know, willing to go out and adventure the world myself. And I was more motivated to just do more and want more.
Do whatever you have to do in order to be successful, yeah.
I've been at events where it wasn't really accommodating or accessible for me, and where I was literally the only person with a disability. I was seen as different, as an outcast. But YLF, I wasn't seen that way. I was on the same level as playing field as everyone else. I was, you know, just seen as a person.
I would tell people who are considering getting involved with YLF that they should most definitely apply. It has been a wonderful opportunity to me, and if wanting to take control of their own life is very important to them, if they want to learn about leadership skills, if they want to learn how to advocate for themselves, I highly suggest applying.
Right. I always think it's important to see videos, but see a little bit of the programs and hear from youth, because I can't bring everybody to the presentation, but they will be coming this afternoon, so get ready. And I will go back to this slide. And then that program is also, it does have youth leaders who are paid to be on staff during that time. It also has our youth team who goes into pre-employment transition services, but we also do have people, other leaders within the disability movement come in and also talk with folks. We've had Judy Human, Rebecca and Patrick Coakley, and so have been able to bring in several people who could also come in from the kind of the outside of our state to also provide to start a discussion, because they, the Coakleys and obviously Judy Human has been part of the movement for quite some time, but also participated in when they were youth. And so it's really impactful to hear from others as well. And then they also learn from our staff as well, because the majority of our staff, of course, are people with disabilities. And so we're about 87% of our staff are people with disabilities. And we have a team of about 53 staff members. I'm also going to, can we go back to the slide mode? I think it's small. Yeah. Thank you.
Did that work?
Yeah. And I guess, well,
Okay, hold on. Sorry, guys.
no worries. Technical difficulties is part of everything. So not.
Okay, let's try this. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jack is in the comment. Jack is a YLF delegate who has been commenting. He said he loves seeing himself every time he watches the video. We love seeing you, Jack, and y'all will hear more from Jack this afternoon on the panel. Next slide. Okay, and then we also provide pre-employment transition services. And of course, all of you most likely know that under WIOA, vocational rehabilitation departments have to spend at least 15% of their budget on pre-employment transition services. And a lot of the components that they provide are services that CILs have to lead. They should be leading because that is our specialty area, and we have the strength, but also the peer-on-peer perspective. Having providers that aren't disability-led communicating and teaching youth is just not the same thing. And so as you probably saw and heard from the YLF, youth are needing the peers. They're needing to hear from other peers with disabilities, and they're wanting to feel like part of a community, and they are a part of a community, and we've got to make that better known. And so we've done a lot of advocacy to make our services widespread within VR, but also making sure that they know the significant importance of that peer-to-peer. And so we've sent them journal articles, we've done a lot of collaboration efforts, dialogue, communication, but also showing them the impact of our pre-employment transition services. And so we have been very fortunate to receive funding. We do receive $1 million from our South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation, and that is a CIL approach. So we only have 3 CILs in South Carolina. And so CILs cover the entire state of pre-employment transition services. And so we all have contracts and we're all doing this work. So if that's not something that you're involved in within your CIL, I think that's something we have to make a noise on the national level too, because youth with disabilities should not be receiving these services from just providers who are just another outsider. So overview of pre-employment transitions services, if you're not familiar, it is just skills that students need to get competitive integrative employment. So there are a number of areas that pre-employment focuses on. And so those services are instruction and self-advocacy, workplace readiness training to develop social skills and independent living. There's that word, independent living. Counseling on opportunities for post-secondary educational and training programs, job exploration, and work-based learning experiences. And so obviously, as disability-led organizations, we know the importance of reasonable accommodations and making sure that you are advocating your needs. And so that's one of the services that we go into the school districts and go into the classrooms with young adult leader staff. And every chance we can, we also bring equipped leaders into the classroom to provide they say instruction, but it's providing, really invaluable leadership skills, and it's done through activities that are, more of a universal design approach. So it's not leaving anyone out, but it's also making sure that if any accommodations are needed, that they are being identified and provided. And so we provide a number of different services in the schools around pre-employment transition services. And we see roughly around 12 to 1,500 students per year in the schools. And that's outside of our other youth leadership programs. Next slide. And so, and this is just a reminder too of how important we are to be at the table for everything youth related. But IDEA and the Rehabilitation Act was amended to really talk about these transition services more, and coordinated a set of activities, and the activities from this also really connect with our movement and connect with our own beliefs. And so really looking at the post-secondary education, vocational education, and I do want to say a little caveat here, because not all vocational rehabilitations are equal, and the same goes for us. They know that we are going to continue to be advocates, even though they are giving us all of this funding for pre-employment transition services, but that's something that we discussed with them. Just because you're giving us lots of money, we are going to continue to be an advocate within the VR system. So if people are being denied services or are not getting the services that they're entitled to, we will be advocates in this. And so that's a very important piece of understanding that you have to have with vocational rehabilitations. We go over competitive integrative employment, and that's employment in the community. So that's not the segregated workshops. That's not just employment for people with disabilities. We want to go away from all of this. We want to make sure that people with disabilities are working in the community of their choice, making a good earning wage. Supported employment, continuing in adult education. So do they want to go to college? Do they want to continue skill building through technical trade? Adult services. So it's really our jobs to help them transition from their high school days to their adult life. And so really preventing that gap of services that often happen after transition. Independent living, there's our independent living, and community participation. And so my philosophy, if disability-led organizations are not running these programs, it is not doing the program, it is not doing the youth justice. And so really making sure that you are advocating. We are in the Rehab Act, just like vocational rehabilitation. And so connecting those two, that we were put in place, Centers for Independent Living, to actually support employment, support people with disabilities to help achieve their independence within the community, within their family life, but also within employment. So we are there for a reason as well. And reminding them that is as a critical advocacy tool that you have to pull out. We will go to the next slide. And the intersection and coordination. And so wanting to touch base on some things that we've learned through the process. Again, if you don't have youth with disabilities involved in your programs and creating the curriculum, you're doing it wrong. And so making sure that you have other youth leadership programs that youth are helping you and testing these pieces of curriculum and helping you make sure that they are going to be accessible and interesting to the younger generation. So what we really strive for is just making sure that, you know, all services are based on individual students' needs, taking account of their strengths, preferences, and interests. So really, we don't just come with the curriculum, is what I'm trying to say. So instruction should be tailored. It should be related to services, should be relevant to what they're needing to be learning within the schools. Community experiences should be accessible and relevant. So we often see people placing individuals, which I don't necessarily agree with job placement. But I do see people being placed into employment that they have no idea about reasonable accommodations or how to work with people with disabilities. So really do your research and making sure that that's something that you're providing to employers as well, of how to ensure that they are knowledgeable and aren't going to discriminate or deny somebody accommodations. Development of employment and post school adult living objectives, and those are personalized. Those aren't one size fits all. So being able to have some opportunities to spend one-on-one with the individuals that you're working with, and then daily living skills training and functional vocational evaluations should be used when appropriate, but that's not something that pre-employment should ever start with. And so making sure that while you're doing an assessment, nobody is one size fits all, so should not be just going into the evaluation process immediately. And we're seeing ourselves a lot of times having to advocate for students that VR kind of have the philosophy of too disabled to work. And so we're having to still do a lot of advocacy within the schools and within the VR system during our pre-employment transition services at the schools to educate vocational rehabilitations about how somebody is eligible for VR services, but how they may be using implicit bias regarding disability within their evaluation process. And so we've been able to make some changes there as well. So your advocacy hat does not come off when you get funding. So remember that you just have to use tact and definitely provide some education with how the funding is not going to stop you from advocating. So next slide. And then just wanting to show you the difference in organizations and what we should really focus on with our strengths. And so we did our organization did a pre-employment transition service presentation with our Department of Ed and our Department of Vocational Rehabilitation about 2 years ago. And we really sat down and really looked at what are we each good at? What should we focus on, which each organization. And so we've really looked at Department of Education. They provide the Office of Special Education. They provide guidance to school districts and oversee and enforce the special education law. So they are also aware of education gaps that they have to be made aware of by different advisory groups that are mandated to be parents, but also mandated to be people with disabilities, which I think is overlooked oftentimes. So CILs need to make sure that they're being part of the IDEA advisory councils within the state. Vocational Rehabilitation Department, they're VR counselors. They have staff and provide rehabilitation services, vocational guidance, and counseling, and they do job placement. And Centers for Independent Living, we are the experts with disability rights, legislation, disability justice, so really taking account of marginalized consumers and looking at the additional barriers that they may have, disability culture, peer-to-peer services, advocacy and self-advocacy, accessibility, and independent living. And so we've really created a list where VR and Department of Education really comes to us as the expert area, and our organizations are Centers for Independent Living are seen as that within our states. And so making sure that not just any provider is providing these services, because it's just doing the students injustice. And so just providing a lot of education to VR and Department of Education and show how important we are. We're in the Rehab Act, guys. We were put here, we were created for a reason. And so making sure that others around you know that. And we are the disability community. We are disability led. So if other programs are being created without us, it's not doing our community justice at all. Next slide. And then just some youth trends and needs for Centers for Independent Living. We added a few slides that will just kind of help. Where do you go from here? And so youth with disabilities are, often viewed through a parental, medicalized, anti-disability justice lens. And so this leads to a number of different things that CILs should really encounter and should address when they're seeing this within their youth. And so by being seen, and I think Aaron and I can speak within our own experience, like being seen as different and being seen, as an other is not going to cut it anymore. So we've got to definitely make sure that the CILs are taking ownership of our true responsibilities to be disability led, but also to create leaders and make a difference in the lives of youth with disabilities. And so being a youth with a disability and being viewed by all of these angles that are really truly unaware of some of the disability aspects and disability culture, it leads to students and youth having poor self-esteem and lack of disability pride. We see that with folks that are entering NYLF and entering in our QUEP programs and through pre-employment transition services. There is a true embarrassment of having a disability. And that's something that we go in and we make sure that they understand, like, hey, disability is not a bad thing, and really help start to embrace that disability pride piece. They have no knowledge of their rights and success of people with disabilities. This is not a mandated service within the schools, which it should be, that disability rights and history is taught within all public education systems. Inability to identify needs and accommodations. So not knowing about the world of technology and the world of accommodations. So when they're seen as a different by other lenses, they're not learning this stuff. Learned helplessness. And I think Centers for Independent Living have seen this across the board, even with some of our staff, that sometimes we've not learned accountability or just overall achieving our own goals. And so sometimes people have seen that it's easier to do things for people with disabilities versus educating them on the skills on how to do for themselves or ask for the accommodations that they need. Inability to advocate for themselves, being controlled by others. We've got a whole issue within our country with the guardianship situations, and the power of CILs to stop this at the youth age is significant. We have to advocate within the schools that guardianship is not the option for when students turn 18. And we say that often, and that's we're needed in that area. Unaware they have a community, not understanding the bigger picture of the disability community, and that they belong within our community and they're safe with us and we can assist them. Lack of expectations for themselves. And then that leads to further discrimination. And so these are the trends that we're seeing right now within youth, and the needs for CILs to really step up and address some of these issues. But listen to your youth. They will tell you all of this. This is where this list came from, is our youth. Next slide. And then just strategies that engage and empower, youth leading the programs, including the content and the subject matter. Include youth in your CIL strategic plan. So if you have, if you're building a program, make sure some of your youth are part of it. We have our youth leaders, our equip leaders were involved within our strategic plan, and they're also incorporated within some of the strategic plan outcomes for our organization. Meet youth where they are and build and invest in them. That is our future. That's who's going to run our organizations later. That's who's going to advocate for legislation. That's who is going to carry the torch when we are no longer here. Listen and learn. Mentoring is definitely mutual. And I think Aaron and I both have talked about this, where we learn just as much as we can teach from the consumers, but from the youth that we serve as well. And so learn from them. They can help shape the services that you're providing, but also making them successful because it's an actual need. Step up, but also step back. So step up to making a difference, but also recognizing when you do need to step back and you're not hovering. Hire your target audience. If you don't have youth with disabilities on your within your CIL, then that's an issue. And so really look at the diversity in ages within your CIL is going to be really important. Design your marketing and outreach strategy with youth leading. I've seen some strategies that CILs have used that just are not youth friendly. And we've got to be very careful about that. I'm not a youth anymore. I like colors that obviously aren't youth friendly. And so I can't just come up with colors. I've got to really listen and go back to the youth so that we can also focus on targeting that population within our outreach and awareness. And next slide. And Erin, do you want us to take this one?
What's the title on the slide? I apologize. My
Oh.
voiceover's not reading it.
What doesn't work? So stop.
Oh, real quick, I just wanted to also reinforce some of the things Kimberly was saying on the last slide about, things you can do. The stepping up and stepping back. Kimberly mentioned, we don't want to hover, but I think also when we think about our own organizations, or even other community organizations, a lot of times we'll get involved in boards of directors and committees, and myself and so many other people speak to the fact that these are shaping their leadership skills. But I think what the other part about stepping back that I don't want to miss is when we see opportunities in our organization, in our communities, that is not necessarily an opportunity for me, for myself, or yourself, but that is an opportunity to be shared and to support young leaders to take advantage of. I think a critical aspect of leadership is recognizing the skills and abilities of those people you're working with and you're mentoring, and understanding that you are that bridge to helping other people say yes to opportunities. You're not necessarily going to be the reason they go there, but you can absolutely take that barrier away of seizing opportunities for yourself and sharing opportunities with others who would just be rock stars with some of these opportunities. And so then moving on to this slide and things we should avoid. Again, I'm not able to read this slide, so I'm just going to start going, and Kimberly, feel free to jump back in. But I think the biggest thing for me has been tokenism. A lot of times an organization will say, we should really have youth representatives on our board, or we should have young people doing this or that, or we should have people of color, we should have people with disabilities representing on other committees. And what we really need to avoid is just setting these dedicated slots for people and picking the first person that comes to our door. And so this tokenism, it can be a very dangerous thing, which is why it's really important for us to start to really learn about the skills and abilities of the people we're working with and what their goals are and which directions and paths they'd like to take, so that we can really help avoid that sort of tokenistic model where we need a young person with a disability to serve on our board of directors. Just go pick one. That's not the case. Who's been stepping up? Who's been trying to step up? Who's been craving that chance to do something bigger than themselves? And it's not always that hard when you've, as Kimberly's been sharing her programs. When we're already starting to do this work, we're already starting to get to know these individuals. Who can we share that opportunity with? They might surprise you and they might step up themselves, but they won't do that unless they feel like this opportunity is a big opportunity. Yes, it's going to be a challenge, but I have people that are supporting me. I have confidence in myself. And it really comes down to, are we teaching disability pride? And that confidence that comes from that. It's okay to have a little bit of pride in ourselves when it helps us to want to seize those opportunities, but then also helping people understand the humility when they themselves will one day need to step back and pass that torch on to another generation. So, Kimberly, I'll let you continue.
Some of the things that I'm going to say is difficult, because I do see centers for independent living doing this, and sometimes it's not a successful approach, and I see them struggling. And so I'm going to be really real with you guys within the next list of things. But non-disabled staff leading the youth services, that's got to stop. Parents, teachers, I see CILs that are hiring parents without disabilities, or teachers or previous teachers. That's not what we're looking for, and that's not our movement. Our movement is disability led. We are a center for independent living. They have movements. There's teachers that are teaching in classrooms. There's parents that are doing their own thing. And so we are so needed in the schools. And so making sure that your staff in the school that are going in the schools and providing youth services are people with disabilities, that is significant. Not including different perspectives of youth. And I see this often as well. I don't see youth with IDDD being served as much as other populations. And so really understanding the need to listen. We are cross disability. So making sure that you have that perspective of just that, making sure that you have people that are leading you who have intellectual and developmental, and who are blind, deaf, have physical disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, and really listen, because that is our job and responsibility, to making sure that we are serving all people with all different disabilities. Presenting without youth. And I don't like to present youth programs without youth. And so one of the things that we talked about with developing this is to making sure that we are having a panel afterwards. And so we will have a panel of young adults with disabilities who, Jack is one of them. I see Alexis Rivers is already on. They will be joining us this afternoon to educate us about what attracted them to IL, what keeps them engaged and coming to our programs, what keeps them engaged in independent living, and how are they using their skills to make the community around them better. And so they're gonna, so they'll be on. So make sure you catch that this afternoon. Not teaching disability rights, disability justice, history, IL, leadership, and the importance of representation. So we, during one of our events during Crip Camp, during YLF, we show the movie Crip Camp. And it was suggested to us from an outside organization that we show a different movie that did not include disability representation, that didn't even have an actor with a disability, but they were portraying an actor. And so, not teaching the importance of actually hearing and watching movies with actual disability representations, and from youth actually learning from that is really important. You can't act disability, because it's always going to be stereotypical. Adults coming up with the content of program implementation strategies, you're not going to get it. You're not going to be successful, believe me. The things that I think would work do not work for youth. And so making sure that you are letting youth lead. How do we do this program with you? How do we implement this program for youth? How do we even do outreach for youth? And so really listening and having your youth consumers leading. Using the wrong social media platform, like if you're posting just on Facebook, you are missing the crowd. That Facebook is apparently very old school, and youth do not utilize it. Their parents will utilize it, but not them. And so making sure that you are listening and taking different approaches. You can still post on Facebook, maybe to provide education about the program, but if you're trying to attract these youth, then you need to go and do what they think they're using, and that's hip right now. See, I use the word hip. That's not a youth-friendly word either. So not holding youth to expectations. And so you need to teach youth and hold them to expectations and show them the magic of accommodations through that strategy as well. And so holding them to the same expectations for the program and providing accommodations to show them the benefits of utilizing tools to help them be independent and fulfill tasks. Not teaching advocacy or activism. That's critical, and our equip folks will definitely talk probably more about that. And then another tip, exclusion of food. Apparently youth eat a lot. And so making sure that you are providing food in your programmings through, donations, unrestricted funds, however you can. But there's a lot of food involved with youth programs. And next slide, and we've got a couple of minutes. I do want to open it up for questions. Aaron and I were a little bit concerned about running 2 hours, but we did it, Aaron. Just the impact of youth leadership in IL is just creating leaders with disabilities to lead our movement. Progressive and trending changes in IL practices. Remember, what worked 20 years ago does not work now, and we've got to learn the trend. More education occurring in schools and among peers. Professional learning directly from youth with disabilities. So sending youth to go teach others. Leadership is not age specific, and so remembering that you need all ages within leadership. Historically informed leaders with new ideas, so they're able to inform leaders that have been in the movement like myself for a while with new ideas. I learn every day. Diverse people and perspectives, a continuum of focus and growth. And a culture of mentorship and cooperation. And I'm going to definitely answer. I see a lot of questions, but can we open it up to the floor really quick, Jenny?
I think we had a couple of questions come in on the Q&A section.
Okay.
But we do have to end in 1 minute. So maybe what we can do is take note of the questions that we don't answer and then answer them when we come back later on this afternoon.
We can absolutely do that. Both Aaron and I will be at the panel the bit before, so we can continue this.
Okay, so maybe why don't we plan to do that then? Because I think we probably only have about 20 seconds left. So for everybody, please make sure you rejoin us at 3 p.m. Eastern time. That is 2 hours from now. And we will answer some questions when we come back. And then we have an amazing panel that has been put together by Kimberly and Aaron. So thank you all for joining us. Remember, it is a different link. So please check your emails for that different link, and we will see you all in 2 hours. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.